What's going on, guys? This is Mr. School back again with another video. Today's topic is the idea of the failed normie. Let's get into it. So before we get to failed normie, we got to talk about what the hell a normie is. Now, we've already covered this topic in the NPC video and the video on the players of the game, but I'm going to cover it here. We're just going to cover some old ground here again, just to get some things started here. So let's go. So we have normie. It's usually described as an average person, also known as an NPC or mass-produced individual. These people are your grunts, your run-of-the-mill people you see on the street every day. They have very, very mundane ideas they get from the media, mass media. Their minds are full of top 40s music, um, you know, run-of-the-mill cape shit movies. Whatever you want to call it. A sports ball, as they're saying, whatever you want to call it. So these people here are mass-produced. They're NPCs. Their minds are full of bullshit. It is what it is. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they're just like your run-of-the-mill average person. And they're subdivided into three strata. You have your high tier normie, which is usually a 7 out of 10, or Brad. Brads are your they're not quite Chad, but they're Brads. Brads are like he looks okay. He probably slays. He slays less than Chad does, but he still slays. You have your mid-range normie, unremarkable people. These are like your fives, your sixes. These are people here that you walk by every day. You don't really look at them. They aren't very attractive, but they're also not unattractive either. They're very, very normal. You're not going to look at this guy and call him ugly, but you're also not going to look at him and say, man, he's really hot. She's really hot, or this person's really fucking good looking. You're not going to say that. Then, of course, you have your low tier normie, a socially accepted incel. This is like your 3 to 4 out of 10. These are like your male feminist, your simps. These guys on here are like basically the guys who have accepted, not accepted their incel, but rather these are the types of guys who say, I may be incel, but at least I'm not an incel. You know what I mean? Like, incels kind of become this term that's kind of been wrapped around in a lot of other ideologies. Like if you're an incel, you're somehow a white nationalist, and some shit like that. But yeah, like effectively saying that like I'm an incel, but I don't have the mindset of an incel. I'm the socially accepted incel, so you should still like me. So these guys on here are absolute crap tier, but they're still low tier normie, so it is what it is. Once again, they're either blue pilled or purple pilled. Blue pilled, they're still lying to themselves. Purple pilled, probably these guys up here. Any of these guys could be purple pilled, but it's very, very likely that if the low tier normie finally accepts that he's an incel and starts looking into lookism, starts looking into the social sphere game, starts looking into all this weird shit, he'll realize that okay, he might just become purple pilled. He'll probably never become red pilled, but who knows, or even black pilled. But either way. So the phrase is oftentimes used as a pejorative because the normie is extremely impressionable and therefore malleable. They cannot think for themselves and follow mainstream trends and thought rather than thinking through their own philosophical ideas. So when I say thinking through your own philosophical ideas, what I mean is that you don't really have a thought process behind what you say. Like you might say a talking point like equality is our strength, but you don't really know what that phrase really implies or what that phrase really means. It's just a talking point for you. So if somebody ever challenged you on that phrase, you wouldn't know what to say because you don't have the philosophical ideas behind it to argue the actual point. You only have the talking point. So when I say this, like it's like 2 plus 2 equals 4. Can you explain why 2 plus 2 equals 4? Can you explain that 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4? Can you explain, okay, well, what's a 2? What makes up a 2? Well, 2 is two ones. Can you explain the basis behind what you believe? Oftentimes, a normie or a blue pill incel cannot do this. They very have a hard time doing this, which is why they're NPCs. Oftentimes, normies end up being virtue signalers, which makes them extreme hypocrites. Once again, virtue signalers almost always are like the most racist people on the face of the planet. They just don't know it. They're just really stupid. These are the virtue signalers who think that they are being edgy and cool by screaming out Black Lives Matter while rioting, while the entire establishment supports them. It's this type of guy. It's this guy right here. Like, while he's out there rioting and screaming and saying right wingers are establishment bootlickers, he's over here with like Disney, CNN, the DNC, Starbucks. They all have these blackout signs on their things saying we support BLM. It's like, okay, well, either the establishment is not CNN and all these big huge companies, or it is. So pick one, buddy. All right. Once again, before we get to Phil Normie, we gotta cover the concept of the robot. Now, robots is a phrase I don't really hear a lot anymore. or hear a lot at all. But it comes from the usually it comes from the board R9K on the Chinese fly fishing forum known as 4chan, and it's someone that usually frequents that board. So these people call themselves robots. I think it's according to Urban Dictionary. These people normally lack real life social skills. So like these people have like really shitty social skills. They don't really know how to navigate a social game. They don't really know what to do. They have a hard time talking to people. They have a hard time interacting with people, and they might be have bad looks too as well. So they might be incels on the lookism scale, like a 3 or 4 out of 10. It could be somebody who's a high tier normie, but very likely to be somebody who's like kind of like a 5, maybe a 4, maybe a 3 out of 10. So they have phrases like that feel with no GF, that feel with no girlfriend. Um, and then there's this question here: Are robots the same as incel? I would say yes to this, if only because their circumstances are very similar. But the problem is, some robots, at least back in the day when I was browsing this board quite a bit, back when it was kind of like a very active board, you could tell that like some robots that didn't want to be called incel, and incel wasn't nearly as popular of a term than it is now. But even now, there's some robots who say, well, we're not incels, we're robots, we're different from incels, because incels kind of once again has become kind of this like catch-all like insult instead of being like when somebody calls you an incel nowadays, they don't really mean someone who can't get sex or somebody who wants sex but can't get it. What they mean is that, oh, you're somebody who's undesirable or somebody I really hate. It's like calling somebody an asshole. Like it's become the new catch-all insult instead of being it's like the new faggot. Like it's like I'm probably gonna get banned now, but so it's like saying that word. It's like saying dropping the F-bomb. Like nobody really means it in the way that they mean it. What they really mean is that, oh, I just don't like you. And people oftentimes use that phrase for that purpose. So yeah. Some robots prefer the phrase TFL with its true force loneliness or forever alone types. Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of throw all these guys here in the same bucket of incel, but some people would say if you've ever had sex, you're not an incel. If you've had sex like once, but you didn't have it 20 years later, you're an incel. It depends on how extreme of a definition you want to have. All right, let's keep going. Now we finally get to our failed normie. So a failed normie, according to incel.wiki, is an incel-ish. So meaning that like they're incel, but they're kind of not incel. Like incel-ish normie that has tried climbing the social ladder and failed multiple times. I actually prefer the second definition down here, but let me read this thing here. The further down the normie scale you are, the more likely you are to become a failed normie. So basically, if you're like a low tier normie, you're very likely to become a failed normie. Higher tier ones, unless something crazy happens to you, you're very likely to stay where you are. The middle tier ones, you have a higher chance of becoming a failed normie. Someone who had the chance to be classified as normal and yet somehow screwed it up, thus becoming a failed normie or a robot. This is from Urban Dictionary. I actually prefer this definition down here myself. It kind of implies that like you lost it all, like hey, like or rather that like you were in high school and like you had potential, but somehow somewhere down the line something went either horribly wrong in your life or something went horribly wrong in yourself, and all of a sudden you just became a failed normie. Or a better definition, if I can combine these two together, would be an incelish normie that had the chance to be classified as normal and yet somehow screwed it up, thus becoming a failed normie. This is the definition I would use if you just combine the two together, using both phrases here. Because I like the phrase incelish because it implies that like they're incel, but they could be a higher tier, like a high tier normie who's like a 7 or even a 6 who doesn't look that bad, but he's like still somehow fucked it up. So yeah, normally has had relationships in the past, but has had a dry spell lasting months or years. The longer it goes on, the more closer you are to being an incel versus this being incel-ish. If it's months, you're incel-ish. If it's years, you're probably an incel. You need to just accept that shit and move on. And then of course you have this R9K phrase here from called the cyborg. I'm going to use the Wikipedia definition here first before I start describing it in my own words, but it's a being with both organic and biomechanical body parts. Okay, so failed normies might browse and participate in online discussions, mostly to vent about their situations. It seems that most failed normies have abandoned the normie lifestyle yet, and they are eager, or have not abandoned the normie lifestyle yet, and they are eager to pick up the slack and start over again. Failed normies are characterized by having a good childhood and good memories from school period, and somewhere along the lines they became loners. Most still take part in social activities such as partying and drinking because they believe that lay down and rot and roping are a result of rotten mind. Okay. Um, I agree with part of that. Disagree with part of it. I think it's somewhat true though. I think a lot of it is like, especially if you're a higher tier normie, like a 7 out of 10, that probably very much applies to you. You know, I'm gonna cover this stuff in the next slide, so let's keep going. So before we get to our what causes you to just kind of fall, we're gonna start to cover our cyborg here. So cyborg is a R9K term coined to describe a failed normie. Seems to imply, this is my own definition here, seems to imply someone who has the ability to navigate the social game adequately, but not enough to ascend. So they might have weird hobbies. You might enjoy anime like I do. You might like video games like too much. You might have like really odd hobbies. You might like fly fishing, and you might actually enjoy posting in a fly fishing forum called 4chan. Um, yeah, you have these weird tendencies or weird quirks that you're almost there, but it's like you're in this weird uncanny valley where like you don't really like you don't fit in either world. Like you're not really an incel as much as you are, but you're also not really a normie either. Like you're in this weird uncanny valley that like you can't really like no one can really classify you adequately, so they kind of just call you a cyborg because you're stuck between two worlds. Um, you're missing some social cues once again. Like you're missing these like depending on how stunted you are. This is why that one video I talked about I had called Peaked in High School. It's not called Peaked in High School, but it was like a video that was kind of like the idea of it was like the social what was it called, social abstractions or behavioral abstractions, where I talk about like you need to like pick up as many social cues as you can from people, either by talking to random people in a job environment or by talking to anybody really, trying to like women and men especially, women especially, to get a better idea about what you need to do to like ascend and what you got to do to like actually like like be able to talk to people. Um, if you're missing some social cues. You might miss the a lot of them actually because you don't have the ability to like navigate that social sphere yet. So you're if you don't have this stuff right here, you're not really considered to be a what we would call normal. People will look at you kind of odd and say, well, why didn't he get that social cue? That's really odd. Why did that one not land? Why did that one not landing? What's going on with this guy? He's really weird. That's odd, huh? People might give you the side eye. You know what I mean? And of course, you have organic. You have this. We're going to go back to our definition here of being organic and biomechanical here. So you have the organic side, which is the black pill side. This is the humanity of you. This is the human part. This is the part of you that's like black pilled knowledge. This is like the part of you that made it out of the matrix, and you've out. This part of you's like in like the golden, like you're seeing like half gold, half the real world, and it's like whoa, like you're in this weird in between part here. Then you have the mechanical part, which is the blue pill side. This is the fake NPC bullshit side of you that's like, okay, well, I can navigate both. I can do both. It's like being both, dark and light side at the same time. You can navigate both worlds. And it's really odd. It's really freaky to do so. You basically exist between two pills. Has black pill knowledge and understands it to some extent, but can navigate a blue pill world. Now this all seems to be focused heavily on social cues and less about looks. But I'll get into a look at them next and see what. Well, right here. So, what causes a failed normie to fail? What causes you to go from being a a 7 out of 10 normie who was like the best in high school to being a nobody? Um, well, part of it could be you peaked in high school and never amounted to much after your glory days on the football team. So like, let's say you're a Brad and you're like, man, I'm really somebody in high school, man. And then like all of a sudden you get to college time and you just kind of flunk out. You become a flunky. You drink too much. You party too much, and you don't do anything else after that fact. Well, people expect you to keep up with them. So like by the time you're like 35, 32, people said you should have kids by now. You should be talking about your kids and your families. You shouldn't be still be talking about being in high school and drinking anymore. So if you don't have things in common with people anymore, you're going to be way behind the curve. Um, could be a mental cell or former fat cell. Mental cells are a little bit different than fat cells, obviously, but mental cell basically like someone who has a mental illness that might cause them to become an incel. So you could be a 7 out of 10 to have a mental illness and still be considered a mental cell. You're probably less likely to be a cyborg because you're so probably fucked up and crazy. But people will avoid you, and that could blackpill you and cause you to be in this weird in between state. fat cell's an interesting one because, like, in theory, like becoming fat cells like removing yourself voluntarily from the game a little bit because like people don't want to date fat people obviously, so like you kind of like if you intentionally, I don't think intentionally, but like let's say you become fat even though you have a good face, you're just really fat so no one can see it. You're effectively voluntarily your fat cells vol cell is very true, so you're voluntarily celibate, so you're kind of becoming like an observer. You're kind of just watching and looking and seeing what people are doing. This is a weird state to be in because like you could still be, you could either be a normie, but if you wait too long to lose the weight, you could become a failed normie. And the failure comes from the fact that like you missed all the social game back when you were in high school, college, and earlier jobs, and now you're kind of stuck here. So you might have lost the weight later on in life, and you might still have a chance on dating apps now, assuming your face is good enough. But you're in this weird state now where we're like, oh, you experience the lookism part because like nobody wants to date you because you're fat, so you realize that oh, lookism's true, but you never experienced it the real way of like your face isn't ugly, you're just ugly because you're fat. Now, one of the worst ways to become a failed normie is extreme injuries. It's pretty fucked up. Obviously, you get your face fucked up, you get your body fucked up. Your people just don't want to be around you. This is true. The video on Facing LMS's channel about this, where like, if you have like a huge scar, people will avoid you. No one wants to be around the guy who looks like a fucked up goblin because he got fucked up in a car crash and shit like that. So it's pretty messed up. And then of course there are stratifications. I haven't really thought that part through too much. Obviously, you might think, well, this is a pretty easy thing to do, right? But it's like trying to think about where I would put different people at on the stratification list, and I might make another video about this topic later on about where a stratifications list of it might be a shorter one than this one here, but a stratifications list of like where I would put different tiers of failed normie to see you have your black pilled failed normie or a cyborg maybe at the very top, and your blue pilled kind of like failed normie at the very bottom. So it's something like that. But at the very end of the day, this has been Mystery School. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment if you liked the video, or if you didn't like the video, let me know. Never forget I have the weekends chats. So the weekend chats are always on the weekends, either Saturday or Sunday or Friday sometimes, depending on what day I feel like doing it. So normally lasts about 2-3 hours. Just talk random shit with each other on a Friday or Saturday night. Remember, guys, it's a Friday night in your prime, and you're here on a 100 some odd subscriber channel talking about random shit on a weekend chat. But either way, never forget, guys, that wisdom is gold. See you guys next time.